坚持啊啥的，我有时候觉得喜剧不需要坚持，喜剧就需要放弃，你不好笑你就下去，因为
Hello happy writers, I'm Steve Sommin and welcome to my channel. So in my last video we were looking at plotting and outlining, so if you've completed all of that, we're ready to write chapter 1. Before we look at some of the ins and outs of how to write chapter 1, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you get notifications every time I drop a video. Chapter 1 is the one part of the book that most people stress about. It's like how to make that killer opening, how to hook the reader in. Well, don't worry about that for now. This is just the first draft, and the first draft is all about getting your ideas out onto the page by hook or by crook. We can polish it later. That's what editing's for. Avoid cliche openings and don't obsess about that first line. Yes, we all want the perfect first line, but we don't need to obsess about that. What we just want is to get something down on the page. And we want to avoid cliche openings like just waking up, falling from the sky, creating a preview of the climax to come. These are things that we want to avoid because they've been overdone, and a lot of these cliches, they only usually work for TV shows. I would suggest opening the chapter with some action or details that raises a question that will help to drive the reader on to read more. If you can do this in the opening sentence, all the better. If not, it needs to be in the first paragraph. And the next thing, when you're raising these questions, you need to think of it as a mystery box. Don't present it as a question. Just have something in the text that leaves people thinking, well, who's that? What is that? What's this about? The next thing we need to think about is the pace of the writing, especially in the first chapter. Now you need to consider, is it going to be a rising pace or a falling pace or a mixture of the two? It's like a dramatic device. If you can alter the pace and create a crescendo at the end of the chapter, then you've driven the reader along and actually have got them hooked into your writing. If you write with just the same pace all the way through the chapter, I believe that you're going to lose most of your readership. You want to hook them in? Change that pace and consider making it a smooth transition in the pace. So when we approach the task of writing the first chapter, there's one thing that we do need to remember, and that is to answer the 4 questions: when, where, who, and what. However, I would recommend being indirect when you answer these. So, for example, when you answer when, you don't need to give a date, a time, or anything like this. You can use the surroundings, the environments, the technology, the history to actually set when the story takes place. With where, you don't necessarily need to give the name of the place straight away. You can try to introduce it in a more natural way by describing the surroundings in such a way, if it's somewhere that we're really familiar with, then we'll know where that is. If it's some made-up place, we don't need to know the name, but we do need to understand what the place looks like. And this will give us the idea of the where. If it's actually got a name, you can think about how you're going to introduce the name of the place. Is it going to be in a conversation? Is it going to be as a sign on the side of the road? How are you going to do that? The who. It's tempting to give everyone's name as soon as you meet them, but you don't need to do that. This can be like a miniature mystery box. You can introduce a person and think about how you're going to introduce their name. It can come a little bit later on. What we want to know more than anything is what the character is like rather than what their name is. A name doesn't really tell us anything about the type of person they are. However, once you've established the kind of person they are, it's also nice to give them a name. So it helps us to understand who they are more naturally. The what. The what is the most difficult thing to actually bring into your first chapter. So it's like this idea of what is a central point of the story throughout the book? What is one thing that is going to be a recurrent theme, or it's going to be something that drives the motivation of the characters, or it's going to be something that limits interactions? It's like, what is that thing that's actually really important and holds the story together, regardless of what the plot is? So if you've got an idea of how you're going to introduce when, where, who and what, you need to start thinking about your characters, how you're going to build your characters, how you're going to make them relatable. Well, the best way to do that is to give them activities or tasks or something that exemplifies the traits that you want people to see. If you have to say someone is organised, then why should we believe you? We don't see it. You need to show us being organised. Now, the biggest thing that people have issue with is info dumping. If you find that you've got a piece of your text that's actually an info dump, look at it and think, how could I introduce this in a much better way? We don't want loads and loads of information in one go. Maybe you can introduce that information more gradually. Actually, it could be that it's not really that important to that chapter, and it should be drip-fed over the course of a few chapters. That way, we build up this picture. You have to remember, your readers are not stupid. They can follow new information as it appears. I want to look a bit more at how you introduce the names of characters. I would suggest that we use natural dialogue to give people's names. So it's not always natural for someone to say, "Hi, my name's Steve." It doesn't normally happen that way. Usually when people meet each other and build up a conversation, you get little bits of the small talk to find out how they feel about each other first, before they say, "By the way, my name's Steve." That way, we get a sense of what their relationship's going to be like before we actually get their names. Again, think about your normal everyday reactions. If you met someone at the bus stop, are you going to say, "Hi, my name's Steve"? You're not. No. Why should your book be any different? Why should the dialogue be any different? When it does come to the dialogue, read it out loud. Put the emotion that it should reflect into how you read it. And does it feel natural? Maybe record it and listen to yourself talking for both sides of a conversation. Does it work, or does it sound like a badly written play? Now, another part people often worry about is how to describe their characters. Now, yes, we are going to need adjectives, comparatives, and superlatives. Yes, we are going to need all of those things. But I would suggest using similes and metaphors. You know, if you suggest someone looks like an occupation, that says a lot more about their appearance and the way they hold themselves and the way they talk than any amount of description you could ever give. In fact, an example of this would be everything about him screamed high-level banker. What comes to mind? You're thinking suit, tie, confident walk, holds himself tall, well-groomed. That one phrase gives you a lot more information about the look and feel of the character, even the way they talk, than anything that you could actually say. And yes, I know it's like buying into the idea of stereotypes, but that's the point. I really believe that less is more, and if you can use a stereotype to convey an image of a character and the overall feel of the character to everyone else, then I say do it. The next thing, we all want to talk about how attractive our character is, how ugly our character is, so you have to remember that no matter which point of view you're using, whether you're using first person or third person limited, people don't usually think of themselves as being attractive or unattractive in their normal everyday life or as they're walking around. You need to think about how other people react to them. Use other people's reactions to their physical looks to give an idea of how attractive or unattractive they are. For example, our hero walks into a supermarket. There's a young girl working behind the counter. She gives the hero a double take and then, she leans forward and bats her eyelashes. This says a lot more about how attractive she finds the character than actually saying he's very handsome. Obviously, it doesn't need to be that overt. However, the opinions of others do shape how attractive we find other people. If you've got all of these things going on in your chapter and you need to think about how you're going to close this chapter, you want to get something that's going to make the reader want to read more. I understand this. So, the end of your chapter should finish the sequence of events, that have been going on, and then give a hint that there is more to come. You can do this as the character decides that they are going to go out and find this person, or a phone call comes through and says, you need to come. Whatever it is, it's a new prompt to move the character on into the next chapter. And that's what these cliffhangers are. We get this prompt. So if you have the prompt, you're like, well, what does he do? What does he go? We want to find out. And that helps to drive the reader on to the next chapter. Once you've written the end of your chapter and you're happy with what you've done, it may be worth going back and reading through the descriptions of the places and think about, have you actually covered the 5 senses? Have you covered like the sounds, the smells? If you're talking about different things like foods, have you got the taste? All these make for a richer environment and a richer description. And it helps to build a better picture for the reader. If you've not got these, then you may want to go back and just tweak it a little bit. Don't worry about the grammar and stuff like that. That is not what you're doing at this point. What you're doing is making sure you've got everything you need for the descriptions. Maybe it's a little rough, but we'll fix that later. With that said, this is just a few things I think that you need to include in your chapter. I think the most important thing is to get your chapter finished and to get as much of this in as you possibly can, and that will actually make for better writing. Remember, you are gonna be a writer. If you like this content and you want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe, and then ring that bell to get more notifications on my next video. Until next time, bye.